Before you continue, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to the channel. I've got another compelling story coming tomorrow that you definitely don't want to miss. This one's just the beginning. Stay tuned for more twists and turns, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you're the first to know when the next chapter is up. Thanks for being part of this journey. The house was unusually quiet that evening. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the type that hums beneath your skin. Subtle, watchful. I had just finished folding the last load of laundry, and the weight of the day clung to me like the stale scent of fabric softener. I needed a shower, not just to wash off the dust, but to silence the rising tide of thoughts that had been pressing against the back of my mind. The water ran warm as I stepped into the steam. My eyes closed. The world outside the bathroom dissolved. Just me, the steady rhythm of droplets, and the tiredness that I hadn't yet admitted to myself. I wasn't thinking about anything specific, just breathing. And then I heard it, a faint sound, barely a shuffle. I opened my eyes, heart skipping for no rational reason. The bathroom door creaked slightly, and through the fogged glass I saw a familiar silhouette. It was my dog, Nico. He padded into the room silently, ears low, tail still. Not playful, not curious, just present, watching. I wiped the steam from the glass and called his name, lightly, but he didn't move. His eyes were fixed on me, not in the way dogs usually do when they're hoping for attention or food. It felt different, sharper, as if he was trying to understand something I didn't even know about myself yet. It wasn't the first time he'd followed me to the bathroom, but it was the first time I felt observed. Not by him, but through him, as though the silence I had built around myself had been interrupted by something uninvited. I finished my shower quickly, wrapping myself in a towel, unsure why I felt so rattled. Nico turned and walked out before I even stepped onto the bath mat, as if his job there was done. Something about his presence stayed with me. I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. My face looked the same. Tired, yes, but that was normal. Still, there was a restlessness behind my eyes, a question I couldn't name. By the time I was dressed, I heard the front door open. He was home, my husband. His voice echoed from the hallway with a casual cheerfulness that felt too loud for the quiet I had just emerged from. "Babe?" he called. "In here," I replied. He walked in with that charming smile of his, tossing his keys on the table like always. Nothing seemed different. And yet, everything did. I didn't tell him about Nico walking into the bathroom. I don't know why. It didn't seem like something worth mentioning. At least not yet. Instead, I watched him as he moved around the room. The way his eyes didn't quite meet mine. The way his voice softened only when asking about the groceries, not about me. The way he didn't notice that I hadn't laughed at his usual jokes. It's strange how your world can start to shift without any one clear moment. No confrontation, no raised voices, no broken dishes. Just a dog standing in the doorway and a quiet voice inside whispering, "Something isn't right." That night, I lay in bed beside him, wide awake, while he fell asleep within minutes. I turned to face the wall, my hands curled into fists beneath the covers. Nico was lying at my feet, his breathing slow and steady, but every so often, he would lift his head and look at me, as if he could feel it too. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. But I knew. This was the first ripple. Something was beginning, and it had already touched the surface. The next few days passed in a blur of routine, the mundane details of life settling into place again as if nothing had changed. My husband James seemed the same. He was kind, attentive, almost too attentive, as though he was trying harder than usual to make up for something. Or maybe I was just imagining it. After all, I hadn't caught him doing anything out of the ordinary. Not yet. But there were moments. Tiny, seemingly insignificant moments that stuck in my mind like thorns. It started with the phone. One evening, I watched as he left his phone on the kitchen counter while he went to the bathroom. His screen lit up as a message came through. It was from a contact I didn't recognize. I should have ignored it. It wasn't my business after all. But my curiosity got the better of me, and before I could stop myself, I found myself glancing over. The message was simple. "I'll be waiting for you tonight. Don't forget, love." My heart sank. It was too casual, too intimate. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, but I didn't react. I didn't pick up the phone. Instead, I sat there trying to steady my breath, hoping that I had misunderstood. Maybe it wasn't meant for him. Maybe it was a mistake. When James returned, I was already in the other room pretending to read. He didn't seem to notice my sudden shift in behavior. He never did he? When you've been together long enough, you start thinking you know everything about each other. But sometimes you're blind to the smallest changes. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I was overthinking it. But I couldn't shake the image of those words. I'll be waiting for you tonight. Don't forget, love. The next day, something else happened. A detail that should have meant nothing, but it didn't sit right with me. I was picking up his things from the living room when I found a receipt tucked underneath the couch. The date on it was recent, and the store was one I knew well. It wasn't anything special, just a small boutique I'd gone to last month. But the name on the receipt caught me off guard. Sophia's Jewelry. I froze. James had never been one for gifts, certainly not without a reason. He didn't buy jewelry, especially not at a place I was familiar with. I glanced around the room, trying to connect the dots, but nothing added up. I didn't ask him about it. Not yet. I wanted to see what he would say, what he would do. But it didn't escape me that these things were beginning to pile up. First the message, then the receipt. Small fragments of a story that I wasn't sure I was ready to hear. It wasn't long before I started noticing other signs, subtle things. The way he would spend more time on his phone, always just out of sight. How he would start saying he was working late, even when I knew he wasn't. The way he had become distant, not in a glaring way, but in a quiet, almost imperceptible manner. But what really tipped the scale was the day I found a strand of long, dark hair on his shirt. I knew it wasn't mine. It couldn't be. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the moments in my mind, trying to find the explanation I so desperately wanted. I told myself it didn't mean anything, but the doubt had planted its seed. It was no longer about the phone message or the receipt. It was the fact that I didn't trust him anymore, and that's when I realized that the small things, the quiet signs, were adding up to something bigger, something I couldn't ignore. I was beginning to see the pieces of the puzzle. But the question remained, was I ready to face the truth of it all? I'll take a short pause. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and if you've ever gone through something similar. I'd love to read your stories. And if you'd like to hear more, don't forget to subscribe. I'm continuing now. The days following my discovery felt like I was walking through a fog. My thoughts were muddled, my emotions all over the place. I knew something wasn't right, but I couldn't bring myself to confront James. Not yet. I was holding on to the hope that I was overreacting, that these things meant nothing. But the reality was, I was losing trust in him with every passing minute. One evening, James came home later than usual. He looked tired, his eyes darker than they'd been in a while. His usual charm was absent, replaced with a distant calmness that unsettled me. He dropped his keys on the kitchen counter, then sat down at the table, scrolling through his phone. I sat across from him, the silence stretching between us like a thick curtain. The house felt too quiet, too small. The air was thick with things unsaid. "How was work?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. It was the same question I'd asked 100 times before, but tonight it felt different. I didn't want to hear the answer. I wanted him to say something that would erase the doubts gnawing at me. But instead, I just listened. "Same as usual," he said, not meeting my eyes. His response was curt, and I could feel a tension in his words, a weight I hadn't noticed before. It wasn't the way he usually spoke. I stared at him for a moment, wondering how we had come to this point. How had everything become so strained, so distant? We had been so close once, so comfortable in each other's presence, but now it felt like we were two strangers orbiting around each other, never truly connecting. I opened my mouth to say something, but the words caught in my throat. I wasn't ready to ask him about the message or the receipt or the hair on his shirt. I wasn't ready to confront him, but I knew I had to. "You're acting different," I finally said, my voice quiet but firm. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but his reaction was not it. He looked at me then, his expression a mix of surprise and frustration. He ran a hand through his hair as if trying to process what I had just said. What do you mean? He asked, his tone defensive. I shook my head, trying to hold myself together. You've been distant. You're always on your phone. You're not here even when you are. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I had to say it. I had to know if I was imagining everything or if something had truly changed between us. For a moment, he said nothing. His gaze dropped to the table as though he was thinking. But when he looked up again, there was something in his eyes that made my stomach twist. Guilt? Or was it something else? I'm sorry, okay? He said, his voice quieter now. I've just been stressed with work, that's all. I wasn't sure if I believed him. It didn't feel like work stress, it felt like something else, something deeper. I searched his face for any hint of the man I had married, the man I thought I knew, but all I found was uncertainty. And then a shift in his expression, almost imperceptible. But it was there, something I couldn't quite place. You've been acting like there's someone else, I said before I could stop myself. The words were out, and I couldn't take them back. James stiffened, his jaw tightening. What are you talking about? He asked, his voice suddenly sharp. I don't know, James, but something's different. I could feel my voice shaking now, the tension between us becoming unbearable. I've seen the way you've been acting, the way you've been avoiding me, the way you've been distant. He exhaled sharply, standing up from the table. This isn't what you think it is, he said, his voice low and strained. You're overthinking this, nothing is going on. But I could see it in his eyes. The flicker of something I couldn't quite put my finger on. And in that moment, I knew. Deep down, I knew. I don't believe you, I whispered, feeling the weight of my own words. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. He didn't say anything else. He just turned and walked out of the room, leaving me alone with the terrible certainty that everything was unraveling. I sat there for what felt like hours, my mind spinning. I hadn't expected him to react like that. I hadn't expected him to shut down completely. It was as though he was hiding something. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just scratched the surface of something far deeper than I was ready to uncover. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about the conversation we had just had, about the look in his eyes, the guilt, the defensiveness, the way his words didn't quite match his actions. And somewhere, deep in my gut, I knew that I wasn't just overthinking things anymore. I was living in a lie. But how far had it gone? How much had he hidden from me? The only thing I knew for sure was that I needed to find out. The days following that conversation were a blur of confusion and unease. The silence between James and me grew louder with every passing moment. He would come home, go through the motions, but there was no real connection anymore. He no longer looked at me the way he used to, like I was the most important person in his world. Now, it was like I was just another part of the scenery. I tried to convince myself that maybe I was just being paranoid, that perhaps I had overreacted. But the more I thought about it, the more the pieces of the puzzle started to fit together. The secretive phone calls, the late nights, the way he had been acting so distant, and the message I had seen weeks ago. I'll be waiting for you tonight. Don't forget, love. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I couldn't turn a blind eye to what was happening right in front of me. I decided to do something I'd never thought I would have to. I started investigating. I hated the idea of spying on my own husband, but the doubts gnawed at me like a hunger I couldn't satisfy. I had to know the truth, even if it shattered me. The first step was the phone. I knew it was wrong, but I needed answers. When James left the house one evening to run errands, I found his phone on the counter, face down. His keys, his wallet, everything was still in the entryway, but his phone remained behind. My heart raced as I picked it up, my fingers trembling slightly as I unlocked it with the code I had known for years. I hesitated for a moment. Was I really about to do this? Was I really about to invade his privacy like this? But the curiosity was too strong, and the desire to uncover the truth too consuming. I opened his messages first. There, at the top of the screen, was a conversation with someone named Sophia. My breath caught in my throat as I read the words. It was the same Sophia from the jewelry receipt I had found earlier. And the words were, well, they were intimate. Too intimate. I can't wait to see you tonight, the message read. I've missed you so much. I felt a chill run down my spine. The room seemed to shrink around me, the air growing heavier with every word I read. There was no mistaking it now. James wasn't just distant, he was having an affair. I felt sick, betrayed. My mind raced, trying to process the sudden revelation. I had suspected something, but to see it laid out in front of me like this, there was no denying it anymore. The messages continued, a steady stream of affectionate words, promises, and plans for secret meetings. There was no room for doubt. James had been lying to me. And for how long? How many of these messages had I missed? How many times had he looked me in the eye and fed me lie after lie, all while carrying on an affair with another woman? Tears welled up in my eyes as I stared at the phone screen, feeling the weight of the betrayal settle deep inside me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The man I had loved, the man I thought I knew, had been hiding something from me all along, and I had no idea how deep it went. I scrolled through the messages, feeling a growing sense of panic as I reached the most recent one. It was a simple text. I'm coming over tonight. Make sure he's out of the house. I slammed the phone down onto the counter, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The room spun around me as I tried to steady myself. I couldn't believe this was happening. I couldn't believe that I had been living in this lie for so long, blind to the truth right in front of me. I needed answers. I needed to confront him. I waited for him to return home, but time seemed to stretch on endlessly. Every minute felt like an eternity as I wrestled with my thoughts. What would I say? How would I handle this? The anger was there, burning beneath the surface, but there was something else too, something darker, fear. I wasn't just afraid of the confrontation. I was afraid of what I would do when the truth finally came out. Would I be able to walk away? Could I even face him again after everything I'd learned? Finally, the sound of the front door opening broke my thoughts. James walked in, his casual smile fading when he saw me standing there, my eyes red from the tears I'd been holding back. He froze for a moment, his gaze flickering to the phone on the counter. You went through my phone, he said quietly, his voice steady but tense. I didn't say anything at first. I just looked at him. My heart ached as I searched his face for any sign of remorse, but all I saw was guilt. It was written all over him. How long? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't answer right away. He stepped forward, trying to reach for me, but I took a step back, shaking my head. I didn't want his touch. Not now. Not after everything I had just learned. How long have you been seeing her? I asked again, this time louder, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. His eyes flickered with guilt, but he didn't say anything. He just stood there, looking at me like I was a stranger. Like we hadn't spent years together, building a life that now felt like a house of cards ready to collapse. I'm sorry, he muttered, but the words were hollow. They meant nothing. I felt a cold wave wash over me. Sorry isn't enough, I said. My voice was stronger now, the hurt mixing with something more resolute. You've lied to me. You've been lying to me for who knows how long. And for what? For her? He didn't respond. Instead, he just stared at me, his face contorted in something between frustration and guilt. I didn't know what to say anymore. The truth was out there now, and nothing would ever be the same. But I couldn't stay in this moment forever. I couldn't keep playing this role of the woman in denial. I needed to make a choice. I needed to decide who I was in this moment. The weight of the truth was unbearable. I had to face it head on. And that meant walking away, no matter how much it hurt. I'll take a short pause. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and if you've ever gone through something similar. I'd love to read your stories. And if you'd like to hear more, don't forget to subscribe. I'm continuing now. The silence in the room was suffocating, each passing second heavier than the last. James stood there, his face flushed with regret, but the damage had already been done. The words had been spoken, the truth had been laid bare, and now there was nothing left but the unbearable weight of betrayal. I could feel the sting of tears in my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I couldn't, not now, not in front of him. This wasn't about showing weakness anymore. It was about finding my strength. Is this how you wanted things to go? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, but it was steady. It was controlled. Were you planning on continuing this lie for the rest of our lives, pretending nothing was happening? He opened his mouth to say something, but I held up my hand, stopping him. I didn't want to hear the excuses, the I'm sorries, the promises of change that never came. None of it mattered anymore. What mattered was that I was done. This version of our marriage, this facade, had come to an end. I gave you everything, I continued, my words cutting through the air with more force than I felt. I trusted you. I loved you. And this is how you repay me? James opened his mouth again, but I couldn't look at him anymore. I couldn't stand seeing the man I had once adored standing there, so full of apologies and hollow regret. The man who had torn my heart to pieces with his selfishness and deceit. You've made your choice, I said, turning my back to him. And I've made mine. I walked to the door, each step a slow, deliberate motion. The air seemed to grow thicker as I reached for the handle, but before I could turn it, I heard him call my name. Please don't leave like this. His voice was strained, desperate. We can fix this. We can fix it? I cut him off, turning back to face him. There was no more anger in my voice now, only cold, painful clarity. How do you fix something that's broken beyond repair? How do you undo the hurt that you've caused? You can't. You can't fix this. He was silent for a moment, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't expected. Understanding. He knew. He knew that there was nothing left to say, nothing left to do. I had made up my mind, and no matter how much he wanted to fix it, he couldn't. I opened the door, the weight of the decision pulling at my chest, and stepped into the hallway. For a moment I stood there staring at the empty space before me, unsure of what was next. But then something inside me shifted. It wasn't fear or sadness that I felt. It was strength. The woman I had been before all of this, the woman who had trusted and loved with abandon, was gone. And in her place stood someone new. Someone who knew her worth. Someone who wasn't afraid to walk away from the things that tried to break her. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I walked out into the night, leaving everything behind. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt free.